Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Immigration Pros podcast. I'm your host, Josh Schachnow, Canadian immigration lawyer and CEO here at Visto.ai. Very happy to be joined today by Nicholas Avramis. Nicholas, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're going international. The podcast is officially international because we have Nicholas joining us from South Africa, I believe, right, Nicholas? But can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're located and working out of?
So thanks so much for having me again. So I'm one of those few RCICs who work abroad. So we have our consultancy here in Midtown Johannesburg in South Africa. And Beaver Immigration's been around for about 6, 7 years now. And a lot of people ask me, like, why did you move to South Africa? How did you get into Canadian immigration consultancy? And I was actually talking to a former friend of mine because I went to Wilfrid Laurier from Toronto. My BBA, MBA, was a TD investment banker. But somewhere around 2014, living in Toronto, I just needed a change in life. I had a lot of friends in South Africa. My sister lived in South Africa. I traveled down. I think my body needed a warmer climate. I wanted to golf 12 months of the year. Uh, you know, I just needed a life change. I was around 34, 35. So I decided to pack 2 bags. I sold everything off. I left. I moved to South Africa. And then, like every foreign national comes to South Africa and falls in love with the country, they all of a sudden realize, yeah, they have an immigration program here. They have immigration rules too. Like, how do I stay here legally? So to make a long story short, I applied for a study visa to come to South Africa to do another master's in finance. And believe it or not, it was much more easier to get a study visa to come to South Africa than it is to get one for Canada. So I was in school for 2 years, and just like every other foreigner who comes to South Africa, you run into immigration problems pretty quick. They have a very restrictive immigration regime. We can't just move down. There's no such thing for work permits. So I found myself constantly in this stress and emotion of, am I staying and like reading? How do I transition to a work permit? How do I get my PR? So I really became obsessed with South African immigration. And then I started doing South African immigration work officially. It's unregulated here in Africa for all my foreign friends. All my Dutch friends, a lot of Americans down here are all on the same key. And somewhere along the line, somebody said, well, what about Canadian immigration? You should be doing that. Everybody wants to go to Canada. And people kept on asking me. I was like, just like your average Canadian, I knew absolutely nothing about Canadian immigration. It's like, just go to the website, figure it out. Like I don't know. To make a long story short, it made sense because I had a lot of friends who were all over Southern Africa. And being an investment banker at TD, my mind, it's like, the best thing for me to do is business immigration. I saw all these P&P programs with businesses. So I got the license eventually in 2018. I set up shop down here. I was when I finished UBC, kind of realized I don't know anything about immigration. I don't know how to fill out a study visa. I don't know how to do express entry. Like, why did I take this program? But luckily I had good people in my class, reached out to the Euro Blaney's, Phil Mooney's of the world. They coached me through a couple of files. I'm like, what was I panicking? This stuff is too hard. And yeah, the business in 2018, 2019 was good. Getting a lot of good express entry candidates. Because the good thing about South Africa is here, it's an English speaking country. So IELTS is never an issue. My clients really perform well on that. And, Canada recognizes all the universities down here. It's very similar. So it was always it's been traditionally a good market to have. So that's kind of like the genesis of kind of my entry. I wouldn't say I'm like an expert or a veteran. There's people like you who've been doing this for much longer, but we're in a tough spot right now. And working abroad, the Canadian brand has taken a hit with everything that's happened. So I see it and feel it every day in practice.
And can I definitely want to dive into that, right? That's been a topic that's come up a little bit more recently, especially on the show. What is life like as an RCIC abroad? Most of the guests we've had on the show have been consultants or lawyers, as you said, kind of living in Canada. So when you first reached out, I was like, this could be a really interesting perspective for a few reasons. But, one of them is, what's it like being on the ground in a, great source of clients right? To put it bluntly, and
So
working
it's
down there.
interesting because I think my experience is unique, and it's unique for a number of things. One, because I'm so far away, I have to make an effort to stay connected, right? I have to watch, your podcast. I have to follow you on LinkedIn, to follow other people on LinkedIn to really figure out what's going on, right? Like relying, like I read that I pick my words carefully here, but like reading stuff in the big newspapers there's this been sentiment right now that's going on in Canada. That doesn't help. A lot of
Right.
that stuff I don't think is even technically right. I think a lot of the policy is misguided, but I have to make an effort to stay connected to figure out what's going on. I think the second thing, and people always say, "Oh, you're so lucky to be abroad. You got this set pool of clients. You only I know there's other RCICs on the continent, but in southern sub-Saharan Africa and South Africa, I'm the only RCIC, which is good because people come to me. But this is what I don't think Canadians and people in the immigration kind of our world fully appreciate. My real competition is US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and maybe not now, but even Israel. There's a big Jewish population here in South Africa. Those are better options. Canada's not on the top of the list. Okay. Canadians need to
Did it used to
understand
be,
that. Possibly,
or
I
how has
don't,
that
at
list
least down
shifted?
here at least here in South Africa and some Saharan Africa, and even in places like Nigeria and Kenya, which I have an experience, at least in my experience living abroad. Okay. Especially here in South Africa, UK, Britannia, that's prize number one. A close second, which fluctuates, is US. Why am I saying this? Is that there is a global competition for talent. There's a lot of smart people around the world, okay? Good people who share our values. But Canada isn't always on the top of the list. Why that is, we can discuss. But that is that is my true competition. We and Beaver, a big part of our marketing is to sell dreams, to sell Canada itself, then get into these, right? There's perception. Obviously, there's the weather issue with Canada. There's like the economic competitiveness of Canada, right? And three, what's kind of catching up to Canada, right, as the brand, okay, is the politics of immigration, right? And what people need to be really careful of is that the message that the political apparatus sends, those newspaper articles, okay, the market, which is everyone outside of Canada, people want to get in, they're listening to that, okay? And what the prime minister says, what the minister of immigration says, the SNAP policy changes, that turns people off, right? It's a very conflicting message, right? And it causes confusion in the market, okay? It needs to be said because, you know, immigration consultants may not even know this. Canadians definitely don't know this. It's that, something that, I don't know what the right word is, maybe annoyed, but, people saying, why are all these immigrants coming to Canada? Why are all these students coming to Canada? Like, why do they have this entitled sense that they should come here? Because the Canadian government told them to come here, Josh. So pre-COVID, down here in South Africa, all the way in Johannesburg, where, we're on the other side of the world, through Educate, I think it's Educan, okay, through the federal government tax dollars, they take big ads in newspapers in South Africa telling kids to apply to come to school in Canada. They put billboards in Sandton, which is Johannesburg's version of Bay Street, where the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is, all the banks. Right? They take out billboards, come to Canada, study. So you have the government telling foreigners, come to Canada, land of opportunity, we'd love to have you. And then they run into something called IRCC, right? Which I don't even know if they're sending messages, but if the messages come out, it's very mixed, right? So I guess the last thing I'd say about my experience is I don't think many people in Canada, RCICs, get complaints from the public, complaints to them about IRCC when they're not even clients, right? So one of the issues and the big issue, and for any RCIC living abroad, is your main point of contact and interaction with IRC is going to be the visa post, right? And a big issue we have down here is processing times. Did you want to speak about that?
I mean, the problem with your answer is it piqued a lot of interesting questions and different avenues that I
Okay.
that I wanna go into. So maybe we'll kind of tackle it one at a time. I mean, number one, I
Sure,
completely
sure.
agree with what you're saying, and I think what most people don't realize is people inside Canada seem to very well think of immigration in a binary way. It's either good or it's bad, right? But when you get into the industry, you kind of realize the nuances and kind of like what you're saying, hey, Brand Canada is actually spending tax dollars to promote Canada because we do need skilled workers, right? We do, we have an aging population, a lot of people retiring, et cetera, and our education industry is a big one and a lot of people rely on it. The problem, I think, is that the government just swung from one side of the pendulum all the way to the other, right? Hey, floodgates are open to come study. And now, you know what? Maybe we made a bit of a mistake and now we're going to cap everything. And, you know, maybe we don't love immigration as much as we did the last few years, which, like you said, mixed signals and kind of difficult. So, what's that like? What's the feeling on the ground before we get into the visa office, which I do want to touch on? Are you seeing, like, have you tangibly or in some way actually seeing the, I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this. Like, what is the perspective of Canada from abroad? And have you noticed a big change over the last couple years?
Yes. And again, I'm really talking from the sub-Saharan South Africa perspective. That's not to say we don't have clients in Brazil and Asia. We have some connection to South Africa. But yeah, the brand has taken a hit. But it's taken a hit for a couple of reasons. And a lot of it is, at least from my perspective, this government has used immigration as a political football. Okay. Um, Maybe a marketing tool. Maybe those words are too excessive. It's the truth. So I'll give you an example. When Canada, under the Trudeau government, let in 25,000 refugees which I thought was amazing. For me, that was a very proud Canadian. This was even before I was in the industry. I had people come up to me because I was the Canadian guy, South Africans who would put their applications in, and they were upset because they thought they couldn't get in and their place was going to be taken. Right? So when you do things like that, which, with the Afghan program, which I think is an excellent program. Canada went in there, we walked away. You can't leave those people hanging, right? But again, people see that. They see their application is going to have to wait. In 2021, I know this visa post, they had to shift their attention to the Afghan files. So people's applications get put to the side, right? It creates panic and mistrust in the market. Same thing with the Ukrainian thing, right? Again, Canada's made a commitment. We owe those people, right? But then like the visa post IRCC gets bogged down. And, and I know you don't do casework anymore, Josh, but I live in an environment or kind of a market where my clients probably know more about immigration than me sometimes. They read everything. They know what's going on with the government. They
Mhm.
see what the ministers say. Okay. Especially our startup visa clients who do all that. So like people aren't dumb out, right? You know as well as I do, like the two big components, especially for business immigration, is your desire. Like you need this. You want to like work hard and make this happen. You need the financial capacity. So at least in the South African market, which we have like a big professional class here, they're paying attention. They're listening. You know, they see what's happening in Canada, right? And maybe Canada's not the place for us. Maybe we get you to the UK with an ancestral visa, or there's more opportunity in Australia and New Zealand, which is a big destination. So we have to be really careful in terms of the way we're, we're speaking to the market and treating new immigrants because yes, there's always going to be people who want to come to Canada no matter what, but people have other options. And I don't think the government policymakers fully appreciate.
Yeah. And I think other people as well, right? There's a lot of anti-immigration sentiment going on right now inside Canada, probably more than I've ever seen. But the problem is, like you said, if you give off an anti-immigrant vibe or your marketing stops, then you can't complain in 3 to 5 years if all the smart people that are looking to immigrate don't want to choose Canada anymore and they're going everywhere else, like you mentioned. And then it becomes a real
Exactly.
problem. So that's why I try to shed light on stuff like this, because yes, we need to adjust our immigration strategy, but to totally you know, turn the knob off and just be so negative towards immigration, I think is a really bad long-term move. But I guess we'll see. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now, the other thing, Nicholas, I wanted to dive into, if you don't mind, is you mentioned the visa office in Pretoria, or around where you're based. First of all, can you explain for those like non-immigration professionals what is this visa office? What does it mean, and why is it so unique when you're not based in Canada? And like what are the unique challenges that you face compared to our colleagues that are maybe practicing inside Canada?
Sure. So, Canada has its very large missions across the world, visas, right? So in non-visa exempt countries, like places like South Africa, people need to apply for tourist visas, right? To enter the country. And again, they're not really tourist visas, but you know what I'm talking. People need to apply for study visas, permanent residency through federal skills, various business class. Those are processed outside of Canada, and they're processed at the local within. They call them the migration section now, but within the embassies, right? So that's a completely different experience to go through a local visa, right? There's a part of me that thinks like they view things differently, right? Depending on which jurisdiction you are, depending on who the program manager is, which will influence a lot of your cases. What, even though we don't speak to them, we don't have a relationship with, we know who they are. I have a Canada has a great mission down here. We have a great ambassador, our trade commissioner. He's awesome. He helps support Team Canada brand. Anytime they have any immigration issues, they'll call me. Not immigration issues, but when schools come down here, they'll ask me to come speak on immigration. Our brand is supported, right? But the problem is, at least, locally down here, that's happening in other jurisdictions. What ends up happening is if there's something major going on in the system, like let's take Afghan refugees for instance, IRCC will start distributing files. And so what happens? That means that people, South Africa or that jurisdiction, that want to go for a summer vacation, or they have an LMIA job offer and they need the work permit for it, they're going to be waiting a long time. So what does this mean? What does this all matter? Well, it does matter, because the visa posts we have down here, and it's no secret, it's, you can check the processing times. About half of my clients who wanted to come visit Canada last year for July, August, they didn't get their visas. They had to wait 12 months. So the visitor visas we applied in March of last year, we only got this year. So, okay, boo-hoo, somebody didn't get to go visit Niagara Falls. Yeah, well, all those clients, they went to New York and Seattle to spend their money. Okay. None of my mining clients got their visitor visas going to PDAC conference in Toronto. Okay. We have major backlogs with work permits. So I have, South African doctors, specialists who need to be in Northern Alberta, Northern Saskatchewan, pediatric oncologists, other specialists that I can't even mention their names. And we're now waiting on month 4 or 5. So why am I telling you this? Why does this matter? Well, it hurts the Canadian economy. It puts Canadians' lives at risks. Now, is it the visa post office? No. I know the program managers. They're good people. They're solid Canadians. I respect them a lot. But it's pretty obvious they don't have the resources, right? You can tell, right? When I started the business down here between 2018 right up to COVID, we'd never have to wait 60 days for anything, right? Here would take 6 months. Then COVID exposed the system, right? The visa posts, at least down here in the small one, they got overloaded. They weren't able to hire back enough locally engaged staff. The biggest problem with this goes back full circle about the Canadian brand, right? So South Africans, for most places, they need to get visas. Word on the street here in Johannesburg and Cape Town, don't go to Canada. Don't even bother applying for a visa. You won't make it there, because if you're planning to go for Christmas, apply for the New Year's after, right? People talk. People go on chat rooms on Facebook, right? So yeah, these things start to hurt the Canadian brand. And then it starts to discourage foreign direct investment. I would invest to a country when I can't even get a visa, right? So it needs to be said, Josh. The US has like two big consulates, one here in Joburg and the other one in Cape Town. You make the appointment, 72 hours you walk in, they'll issue the visa on the spot. So
Hmm.
the question I get a lot asked from my friends down here is, can Canada be a G7 country and not even respond to visa requests? Right?
Right. Well, and so are you saying that for a TRV, it's taking 12 months? And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, like, I get it, right? COVID hits. Nobody saw COVID coming, right? And obviously it caused a mayhem and issues, in every industry. But IRCC seems to be one of the only businesses or organizations or whatever you want to call it that is still, it's been 4.5 years almost since COVID. And you're telling me that they're still struggling because of, what resulted from COVID, right? They still haven't caught up. So, like, what do you think it is? Like,
To be honest with you, Josh, I don't know what it is, right? We talk to, like, look, this visa post has been good to me and to my clients, and they try their best, but you can tell they're overloaded. So one example is one of my clients who was on a work permit in Canada, was in Mozambique doing a mining job. He got hit by a truck, went through the front window. They had a helicopter in from Mozambique to South Africa. I went to visit him at the hospital. Oh, by the way, his TRV counterfoil had expired. The insurance company wanted him on a plane with like in 72 hours with two broken vertebrae, broken spleen. I like emailed Pretoria, explained to them the situation, like this man needs to be on this plane. And they really went above and beyond. They even let his wife come to the visa post, which I don't know if it's supposed to happen, but they do stuff like that, right? Then I'm waiting a year on visitor visas. I'm waiting a year on work permits. I'm getting heat from the employer in Canada. So like, it's obviously a resource issue. Why that's happening, I don't know, right? You know, the word on the street is if if you want to go to Canada, you're waiting a minimum of 6 months. With that being said, we have like tour companies here that want to perform plays. I'll send an email into the visa office and I'll make, here the cultural, economic, social benefits. Can you please help us out? Like this performance, get this concert for this event, people that pay tickets, Canadians will miss out. And they'll help us like that, right? But in not all cases, right? And just like every other RCIC,
right.
we can send in a perfect package and it comes back refused. And we're like, what the heck's going on? I think that's like a global thing within the system. But, when you're having processing time issues, especially in a place in South Africa, it's a very international, Joburg is very international, right? Joburg is like the New York, Toronto of the continent, right? Everyone's down. This is where the money is. Why it's happening, I don't know. What I do know is it has to change. We're taking a hit, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and
And Josh, I'll
especially
tell
in the
you, like,
international student space. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, go on. No, you go on.
I was just saying that apparently Africa has become a hot spot and a really opportunistic source market for international students in Canada. That's what I'm kind of hearing. But if the visa
Well, I'm
offices,
here to tell you that's the
like you
case.
said, probably, yeah, I mean, like you said, I've had some great experiences as well with visa offices around the world, but if they just don't have the resources, what the heck are they going to do? And how are you supposed to, like, I know specific colleges and universities trying to market and advertise and grow their student base in Africa, different parts of Africa. But if this is the case and the wait times and now you're telling me the word is spreading on the street, it's going to be harder to compete with schools in other countries, like you said. So it's sad to hear. But yeah, I'd love to hear kind of where you were going with that thought, and then also I did want to touch on that decision making. Has that been more recent as well? Because what I've heard on the streets here in Canada is that the quality, how do I say this? The quality of decision making on applications has maybe come down in the sense that more and more lawyers and consultants seem to be complaining about, again, shall we call it poor decision making from the processing agents. And I'm curious to hear if you've experienced the same.
So any RCIC or lawyer practicing abroad knows a little secret with these like visa posts. Victoria is no different. More often than not, it's not a Canadian making a decision, Canadian national making a decision on these spots. Canada relies on what's known as locally engaged staff, right? So local South Africans, at least in this jurisdiction, they work in the mission. They also work in the migration section, visa. And in a lot of cases, they have delegated authority to make approval or refusal decisions. Now, from what I understand, only a Canadian National Visa Officer can make a refusal, right? And local staff do have approval, okay? But, do Canadians know that it's non-Canadians sometimes making a decision on these things? You and I, Josh, I think you're from Toronto, right?
I'm based in
We
Toronto.
have a
Yep.
set. Well, where are you originally from?
I'm born in
Well,
Ottawa.
Josh, where are you
Born
originally
and
from?
raised in Ottawa.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, look,
Not too far
y-
away.
you're a pretty smart guy, right? You know the country very well. And you know that if a work permit application comes in for a specialized medical position in northern Alberta in the middle of nowhere, that community needs that medical professional. There's going to be lives in the line, right? So we better deal with that work permit application right now. Probably shouldn't mess around with it, ask too many questions. But I'm waiting 4 or 5 months on it. I'm getting heat from the local health authority in Alberta. I'm getting that doctor calling me every day. Somebody could die, right? Does that locally engaged staff member have that sense of urgency, understand the context? Okay, if it's a doctor in Toronto, like I'm sure they'll make do, right? We're talking the BC interior. We're talking northern Saskatchewan, where they're really desperate and they need that medical professional. And maybe we're talking southwestern Ontario, okay? And there's a mid-sized manufacturing company that makes tier 3 auto parts, and they need fabricators, they need welders, or they're going to lose contracts with GM. And that's going to have significant impact on their business, right? Maybe do deal with that application first before we deal with like an intercompany transfer to Accenture, KPMG, right? So who's looking at these applications? They understand the sense of urgency. That's just my take on it, Josh. That's like where I guess I start questioning the system.
Right, right. So what do you think, where do you think we kind of need to go from here? Obviously, it sounds like number one, these visa processing centers need more resources, whether it be people, better technology, whatever. And then do you have any concerns for the future? Like, what does this mean for Brand Canada over the next few years if things continue as is?
So let me provide you a little bit of commentary on that. One thing, a common theme on your podcast has been, this discrepancy between TRVs in the country and slots for PO. Okay. Now, I'm going to say something that's probably, against the grain in the media and national public policy and the sentiment amongst Canadians, even my parents who themselves are immigrants. You need to increase the PR numbers, period, full stop. Why do I say? And a guy like you and most professionals will do this, but people on the street aren't going to understand this. If you leave those current TRVs without a current pathway to PR, you're going to have an economic mini disaster on your hands, and you're going to have a humanitarian disaster. What do I mean by that? So in terms of my business, we deal with like sophisticated professions, right? Medical doctors, like very skilled people, like crazy IT workers from Cape Town, because South Africa has a really robust IT market here. Really, sorry, Elon Musk came out here, right? So what are you going to do with those people? Are they just going to leave their jobs? Is that doctor in that rural community just going to have to pick up and leave because they can't stay? They can't extend the LMIA. You're going to hurt the economy, right? So you can have economic problems. Canada doesn't pump out nurses. We don't pump out welders and tradespeople en masse. What's going to happen? Those are the people you need to retain in. Then a lot of those foreign students who were sold a dream, who were financially harvested by certain institutions that probably shouldn't even be a DLI, which is like world's worlds. Are they going to leave? Are they going to go back to their home countries where there's really no future for them? There's no jobs. And that you're going to have a bunch of undocumented people in Canada working under the table, not paying their taxes, but still being on the system. Like it could potentially get very, very messy, right? And the Canadian public doesn't understand this. I think people who are really turned on, guys like you and the heroes of the world and Phil Mooney's and Steve Mirren's world, the guys who get it, we're on a big collision course here with our population, right? And then you got social cohesion issues. And I don't see that in the newspapers at all. All I see is immigrants being scapegoated for Toronto and Vancouver's housing crisis, right? Well, I got a news flash, housing in Toronto has been expensive for the last 20 years. I know I used to live. It's always been the supply side of the shit. Now you're going to point the finger at students. You're going to blame investors from Hong Kong, people from Sao Paulo who want to come in. It's Filipinos who want a better life. It's just like a political dog whistle. And I think it's gotten a little bit out of control. And again, that's just my take on it. People may agree, you may disagree. Please comment. I don't know, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think probably the piece that maybe we'll call it like outsiders, like you said, kind of Canadians who don't fully appreciate what's happening is the numbers. And in IRCC's most recent statement on how they were allocating the attestation letters, they said Canada right now has something like 2.5 million temporary residents. And what a lot of people also don't realize is that Canada's yearly permanent resident cap or target is at around 500,000. So what do you do if I understand those temporary residents, some of them are here on multi-year visas or whatever, but let's say a third of them each year wants PR, right? That's what, 7, 8, 900,000. Well, 2, 3, 400,000 of them every single year are not going to get PR, right? There's just not enough room. The math does not add up. So like you said, what are they going to do? Are they going to, oh, okay, well, my visa expired. I'm paying rent. My whole life is here and I don't have much opportunity back home. But you know what? Let me just book a plane ticket. I'll head home. See you later, Canada, right? Like I don't think, sure, some people will do that. Maybe they're saying, hey, you know what? Cost of living's crazy. It's harder to get work than I imagined. I'm going to go home. Screw it. I'll cut my losses. But I think there's going to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people losing their status over the next few years. And they're not going to politely hop on a plane and go back home. And I'm not saying whose fault it is per se. I think a big part of it is the government and the schools have caused most of this. But do you have any thoughts on that? And Nicholas, I guess if, like, let's say you were made immigration minister, what do you start doing tomorrow to try and fix this? Like, what do you think the future should be so we can kind of make the most of the situation?
Great question. I knew you were going to ask me that question. I prepared for it. So if I was Minister of Immigration for a day and I had a magic wand, first and foremost, okay, IRCC needs a radical culture change, which will probably take 3, 5, maybe 10 years. What do I mean by a culture change? First thing is it needs to move towards kind of more like Service Canada, where it's like there to help people, customer service, right? We're here to help people. which type of people? Not only the immigrants, but also Canadian businesses that rely on immigrants to come and fill in the labor gaps, right? Right now, and again, maybe it's more so because I'm in an far outpost here. It's kind of more like a security system, security apparatus. And I get it. There's people who want to get into Canada, which we shouldn't let in, who like, are just bad actors. Let's put it that way. And I think you'd agree, and most RCCs agree out there, and lawyers. The vast majority of people who want to come are good, hardworking people who want a better life for their kids, right? So you need to start treating them with respect. And that cultural change, okay, doing that mindset of like, okay, we're here to help people as much as we can, as long as, they're living up to VRBA and the act and all that stuff is, a big IT upgrade. I keep on hearing these budgets, 300, 400 million, right? Like the interface stinks, right? Okay. You're letting in, you're not only letting in, you're welcoming millions of people to come to Canada and apply. And our IT system sucks. Nobody can make sense of the website. We're still using PDF forms from like the early 2000s that, nobody understands and can fill out. Like you need to update the system, right? And then the third part of that culture shift is something, a common theme you have is communication, right? Communicate what the government policy is. Who do we really want it, right? Make it abundantly clear. And even little things like refusal letters. Stop sending these like templated boiler things. Like obviously you can't write a personal letter for each refusal, but there's a better way it can be done. Maybe have more bullet points, more specific, right? So really, IRCC to most people is a black box, right? And I really get a kick out of, hearing so-called experts in our industry, who like try to interpret what IRCC is going to do, what this means, where are they shifting to. Look, I've been in business a long time, right? In corporate, big business. You can tell they don't know what they're doing on the inside. There's no leadership at the very, very top, right? So these mixed messages are coming through because there's no clear game plan. Liberals, again, not to be political, like they're shifting, they're changing their minds, and it's causing consternation, confusion at the lower ranks. So I'm not here to bash IRCC, the frontline workers, who I think 95% probably like hardworking Canadians trying to do their best to protect Canadians, protect immigrants as best they can. But it's scrambled at the top. The leadership's out of frame. And, again, going back to Brand Canada, and this is the last thought I'll leave you with. Again, we do a lot of startup visas here because I deal with a lot of high tech companies out of like Cape Town. Last year, former Minister Miller goes to, as an Impact, Toronto, makes all these promises about SUV, work permits. They're going to do this, extended for 1 year to 3 years. Where is that? What's happened to it? I still get emails on, right? So it needs a big culture change. And culture, comes from what is our mission? What is our mandate? How are we treating people both on the inside and outside? You need an IT system, right? You deal with millions of people, right? Even the way, like, I don't know if you've ever applied to a UK visa or for a Schengen visa. Not as complicated. You go online, you fill in a form, takes about 3 weeks. Why RCC hasn't been able to move up and improve itself, is a question to be asked. And then the communication, right? You're very upfront of like who Canada wants, who we want in this country. What are the criteria, right? Startup visa, we do a lot of. It's a perfect microcosm for like the whole immigration system, right? It's like you ask 10 people, how does the program work? What's its mandate? Like you'll get 11 different answers. Everyone thinks they understand it. They don't. Like, what are they looking for? Nobody really knows, right? It just needs to become a little bit, even though immigration is great, it needs to become in certain senses very black and white because you're messing with people's lives, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you did a great job of kind of summarizing what I think some of the key issues and opportunities are. Leadership has to be stronger and more positive. The better the tech is, the better all the processing can get, the faster the decisions can be made, the better decisions. Like you said, the refusal letters, I mean, you pretty much have to apply for GCMS because the refusal letters are so useless, which then just bogs down another system even more. So it's a vicious cycle. Nicholas, this has been really great to have you on. Really great to get that. I don't want to say outsider because you're not an outsider, but an abroad perspective from an immigration consultant. Just so we could leave on a little bit more of a positive note, what would you say? Do you have like a last comment or a last few thoughts on people who are still thinking about Canada, still interested in coming here, or maybe they are here right now on TRs trying to get PR? Any last words of wisdom or thoughts or, any last words to leave us with?
I know things look bad right now, and they are, but they can get better very quick. Like the fixes, we don't need a radical, in my mind, we don't need a radical overhaul in the system, right? Were mistakes made, right?
Hmm.
With the student visa program, which I think is the closest thing that Canada had to the US financial crash in 2008. If you think about it, there's a lot of eerie shades in terms of what went on, but all of these things are fixable, right? The IT stuff, like, come on, it's 2024. We can fix this IT stuff. We can have, and I do think even if there's a change in government and even, the rhetoric that's been going on, I don't think Canada's going to expel these people. I think there's going to be another mass TR to PR program, right? So I think there's a lot of the antenna, and this stuff's all fixable. We're Canadian. We can fix this. It's not, we just, it takes will and leadership at the top, George. Better based. I know we're in dark days. It's very difficult as a lawyer in our city right now. Everyone's hurting. But I think in the next 24 months, things are going to get fixed. And I guess I'd say this to anyone, you know, policymakers, politicals, any decision makers, like and this last thing I'll say, Josh, is that people think like, okay, this mass immigration coming in, there's 450,000 people coming in every year, which you and I know it's not the case. 70 to 80% of those people are already in Canada. But if you think that those immigrants who came into Canada or got their PR while they were in Canada are just going to vote for the government in the day and they're going to be lifelong liberal or lifelong conservative voters, no. They're going to vote on their experience immigrating to Canada. And a lot of our clients have had an extremely rough ride, living with a lot of uncertainty. Okay. I've had startup visa clients 2 or 3 years building their business, hiring, and they don't know if they're going or coming. And they bought houses, have kids. That's not a good experience. So the government that can come in
Hmm.
and really, I won't say reform the system, but just start tweaking it, making it more like service oriented, quick decision making, very clear rules and criteria. You're going to win. That's the government that's going to win the next wave of immigrants that come in. It's all good about the experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point that I hadn't really considered. So, like you said, it's not all about numbers; it's about the experience. And I also agree. I don't. I do. I've said this before on episodes. I think Canada has a very good skeleton to its immigration system. I like express entry, I like GTS, I like parts of SUV. So like you said, it doesn't have to, we don't need an entire overhaul. Just maybe a little bit of a shake up, improvement in the culture, in the design, in the IT and stuff like that. Some more, resources allocated properly, and hopefully we'll be headed in a right direction. Nicholas, thanks again so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you sharing your opinions, advice, all that kind of stuff. If anybody does want to get in touch with you, where do you recommend that they go?
Sure, they can visit our website at beaverimmigration.com, or you can email me at nicholas@beaverimmigration.com. If any Canadians or citizens are ever visiting Cape Town or South Africa, give me a call. I'd love to show you around. People reach out to me for that type of stuff. It's not as bad here as South Africa as people make it sound. We do have our problems down here, that's for sure. But feel free to reach out anytime. And then, Josh, Thank you so much for creating this platform for professionals in the industry. You're doing a really great job. I read you every day as much as I can, and keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicholas. Appreciate it. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Take care.